Rev up your engines!
U.S. senators are now calling for an investigation on Ford. For years, they sold these Fiestas and Focuses that had transmissions that they knew had problems. So many people have complained to the National Highway Traffic and Safety Association that they think they should launch an investigation. And from what I've read, they even got some internal documents so far from the lawyers that Ford had. No lawyers were even warning Ford, you shouldn't be selling these things. You know they got a problem. And they can shift into neutral when you're going and then jerk or take off out of nowhere. Ford claims that it's not a safety issue because the brakes and the steering save you, but really, you got something like that that's breaking down. It's not just a safety issue. It's an issue of they were selling transmissions that weren't any good, and they continued to make them and sell them to people. It'll be interesting to see what becomes of it, because from what I've read, if they got to recall them and fix them all for free, it's going to cost them billions of dollars to do so. They shouldn't have sold those things in the first place. They knew they had faults, just like GM had that thing where they knew those electric ignition switches weren't working right. So then they came up with an updated part number, but they didn't tell people that it was a different design and stuff because they didn't want anybody to know. And then they got caught with their hands up high when people died in the cars and then researched, and they're being sued for that too. So people need to think a little more in a bigger picture. If they got something that doesn't work, well, too bad, go back to the drawing board. Don't keep making them and selling them to people. Aaron Flint says, Scotty, what do you think of a 2002 Silverado 1500 with 160,000 miles? Okay, anybody who knows me knows I'm not a GM fan, but that's an 18-year-old pickup truck. They're decent trucks. Now, it's 18 years old, got 160,000 miles. If you're talking about buying it, don't pay much. And for a knock-around truck, if somebody's going to buy it, it could be a fun thing for you to drive around, use it for tooling here. But don't buy something like that and think you can put 20,000 miles a year on it and have it as an everyday driver, because it's going to cost you money. And realize, regardless of what kind of shape it's in, those are gas hogs. So it's going to use up a lot of gas. And if you want something that gets good gas mileage, don't buy that. And Cody Braswell says, what are your thoughts on rebuilding engines? Well, it's a very good question. In the past, as a young mechanic, guys rebuild engines all the time because they were simple. If you had a V8 engine, simple. It was a push-rod engine, very easy to take apart and put together. But now you got quad overhead cams. A V8 engine might have 32 valves instead of 16, variable valve timing. It's so expensive to rebuild a modern engine. Most people will not do it. It just costs too much money to do. It just does. A lot of times you're better off, if you got a blown engine, finding one in a junkyard that's still in the vehicle and buying a used engine. Because see, once they pull them out of the vehicles, they can lie and paint on the engine 59,000 miles when it really has like 200,000 miles. But if it's still in the vehicle and you can see the mileage on it and it's low enough, that's not a bad idea, because rebuilding them is often well beyond the scope or the expense required. Because if it's VVT and a VVT system's not A, it could cost $4,000 just to rebuild it. Then they got to make a profit selling it, so it's just too expensive. Daniel Spratlin says, what is limp home mode and how do you fix it? Okay, when you have limp home mode, that means the computer has found a failure in your car, and it's now using special software so you can drive it slower so you can get to home or a garage and get it fixed. There is no one fix for that. There are literally scores of problems that can cause it to go into limp. Could be a bad fuel injector, ignition, catalytic, it could be a ton of things. That's where we mechanics have to put our fancy scan tool on and start analyzing and see what the problem is. But it means that the computer's found a serious enough problem that it's turned into limp so that you won't have the same speed you had, the same power, and so it won't damage anything. It goes into that mode. And mechanics don't have to check it out and scan it. I mean, if you're mechanically inclined, you have a good scan tool, you can scan it, check the codes, and see if there's anything you want to try to fix yourself. But there's going to be codes, because home mode is a generic code that says, hey, there's a problem, and you got to go further to figure out what the exact problem is. And like I said, there could be scores of different ones doing it. Nancy R. says, 2016 Honda Civic, AC not cooling enough. Read there's problems with the compressor leaking. Should I get Freon filled? There's going to be an ongoing problem. First thing you do with that, get the Freon filled, because as I always explain to people, all air conditioning compressors have to leak a little bit of refrigerant because they run on a belt. Then the belt runs a shaft. The shaft goes inside where the compressor compresses. There's a seal on there. If they did not leak a little, that seal would be perfectly dry and it would burn out. So the seal is made to leak a little bit of refrigerant, so the little bit of refrigerant oil gets on it and lubricates it. They all leak a little bit. And yours is 4 years old. If you got to fill it up every 4 years, what the heck? Who cares? Fill it up and see what happens. Now, if you fill it up and then, a week or a month later it's out again, then you'd have to find the leak and fix it. But on those Hondas, I've had many customers. Every 3 or 4 years, I fill them up. Then they come back in 3 or 4 years and I fill them up again. Hondas are notorious for leaking a little bit more than other car manufacturers. I'll give you an example. I got a 24-year-old Toyota Celica. I've only had to top it up once in 24 years. They leak a lot slower. BC Green says, Scotty, you ever thought about being on a PBS station? Now, I used to do CBS television, Crank It Up with Scotty, and I find that when you do commercial stuff, you're generally too tied in with the advertisers. So you hear me talking bad about products here. I talk bad about them because they make me mad because either I or my customers have bought them and they got ripped off. The product didn't perform as they said it would, or it didn't work at all, or they bought a car that was a piece of junk and it fell apart. You can't say that if these people are running ads on your stuff. So, I would never want to go into anything. Now, PBS, in the past, yeah, they didn't do much advertising, but it's a private company now. And I mean, they do advertising just like everybody else does. And if you're tied into advertising, the odds are you're not really going to tell the truth anymore. That's what I love about YouTube is, hey, it's a worldwide platform, and they allow me to say what I say from my experience, and I help out people, so great. I wouldn't go to any commercial ventures. Hey, if I'm lying here and you see me, on TV making advertisements for Chrysler, you know that I sold out then. It's a good way to check on me, So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.